Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about how to fetch database data and load it into PHP class objects. Using my restaurant website as an example, we'll grab the list of categories from the database. Here's my cats or categories table. It's a very simple table with only a few columns: the ID, name, description, and the order. The order is used to control how the categories are displayed on the website. The first thing to do is to write the SQL statement. I'm just going to generate the SQL statement here. This is a very straightforward SQL statement that grabs the ID, name, and description, and then sort by the category order. Next, we'll open VS Code, and I have an empty project open. We'll create a classes folder and then a cat.php file. Now we'll create the cat class with cat ID, cat name, cat description as the member variables. These properties shouldn't change after being loaded from the database, so all we need is getter functions for each one of these properties. But who wants to be writing a bunch of getter functions, right? PHP 8.1 introduced a new feature that makes this case much more convenient. It's called read-only, so let's see how to use it. I'm going to edit all three properties at once. First, I'll put my cursor on the first line, and then I'm going to hold Alt, Shift, and then click and drag down. Now I can edit all three lines at once. I'm going to add the read-only keyword. This message telling me that in order to use read-only, I need to give the properties a type. All three of these are variable characters in the database, so I'm going to make them strings. Also, we'll change private to public. And then get rid of all the getter functions. Okay, so that is it. Now the variables are accessible directly from outside the class. And after these variables have been populated with data the first time, we won't be able to modify it afterwards. Now we'll create the function to get data from the database. We'll pass in a database connection as the input, and we'll make this function static so we can call this function without instantiating the class. Let me go grab my SQL statement from before, and we'll add it right here. I'm going to add a try-catch block, but first let me add the PDO type to the input. And also we want to return an array. Okay, so now we can query the database. The query function returns a statement object. Now I'm going to fetch all the rows from the database. In the first parameter, we can tell this function to store each row into a class. In the second parameter, we'll pass in the cat class. One thing to note about fetch class is that the class property names must match the database column names exactly. If PHP does not find matching property names, it will actually add those properties for you to the class. However, those automatically added properties will all be of data type string. So if you want to bring back integers or floats, make sure you declare the variable yourself and make sure the names match the columns. So we'll have an array of categories, and let me return this. I'm going to change the exception to the PDO exception. And then we'll just kill the script if anything goes wrong. Now I'm going to create a test page to try out the cat class. I'm going to include the cat class in this script. And then we'll connect to the database. We'll just use the quick and dirty way to connect since this is not the focus of this video. The host name is fine. The database name is MyDB. And then the username and password are just the defaults. Now I'm going to call the getCategories function and get the array of categories back. All right, let's print it out and see what it looks like. Looks like we hit an error, so it's saying that we can't assign null to the category description property. In the database, the cat description is nullable. So we need to tell PHP that this property is nullable. We can do that by adding a question mark in front of the string type. Let's go back and refresh. It looks like we have the data, but let's make it more readable. I'm going to wrap the printout in HTML pre-tag so we can see the spacings and line breaks. Refresh. All right, this looks much better. We can see that we have an array of 7 objects indexed from 0 to 6. And each object is of class cat. And we can see our category description is nullable. And we have a value for cat description at element 5 as expected. Instead of using arbitrary indices, I want to use cat ID as my index instead so I can jump to specific category objects much easier. Back at my fetch all function, I'm going to add the fetch unique attribute to the first parameter. Fetch unique will take the first column of my select statement and make that into my index. One thing to note about fetch unique is that it will use the first column as a unique key. So if there are multiple rows with the same value in the first column, the duplicate rows are dropped. This won't be a problem for us because category ID is a primary key. Refresh. Now we can see that the cat ID is being used as the index. However, notice that my cat ID property no longer has a value. That is because the fetchAll function took the cat ID and used it as the index. We can restore the cat ID property by selecting the cat ID column twice in the SQL statement. Refresh. Now it looks good. Now let's print out a specific category object. Alright, this looks good. Now we have an array of category objects that we can make use of easily. Alright folks, so that is how you fetch data from the database and load it into PHP objects. If you learned something today, please give me a thumbs up and please subscribe if you want more PHP content.